I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and I'll kick it over to you, Jasmine, for the virtual meeting procedures.
Great. So thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name is Jasmine Moore. I'm the Sustainability Director for the City of Lawrence, and I'll be facilitating the Zoom portion of the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and the public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll just have to remember to unmute if you want to speak. In some cases, I may mute or unmute you as needed. Each time that you speak, please remember to state your name for the benefit of those listening remotely. In the menu, you can also turn your camera on or off by clicking the video icon. For the purposes of the public meeting, please keep your video on during the meeting if you have that available for you. And if you're participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen, you'll see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker, and gallery view tiles all the meeting participants. For this meeting, all motions will need to be stated clearly, and after a motion is made and seconded, the chair will call on each board member individually to provide their vote. Again, I want to remind everyone to please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and now I will turn the meeting back over to the chair. And you are muted, Jackie.
Thank you for the reminder. This is Jackie Carroll, Chair. We will move on to the next item. I'm going to pull that up. The item is a statement from the Chair. And okay, I have it written down. I'm just going to read it. So, holding a leadership position within the city structure, I think it's important to address both the worldwide movement for Black lives and the recent local protest and occupation of Mass Street. I admit it is certainly late, as SAB hasn't met since March. I want to say that I am unequivocally in solidarity with the movement for Black lives. Black lives matter, Black trans lives matter, Black disabled lives matter, all Black lives matter. Environmental activism, in its best form, is work to prevent harm. It is proven that Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are disproportionately harmed by the consequences of climate change, pollution, the exploitation of natural resources, and so on. Work in this area is necessary to change the mechanisms causing the disproportionate harm enacted upon oppressed communities. So we here must question, in what ways can we, as an environmental sustainability board, and predominantly white, practically aid the movement for Black lives rather than just trendily inserting our voices without any meaningful impact? Unfortunately, I don't have a perfect answer. But first, we can acknowledge that we, a city board, are part of the system. The City of Lawrence and Douglas County continually perpetuate the systemic racism that is inherent in our justice system. We have cops with numerous complaints against them, disproportionate statistics on who is arrested and serves jail time, a community police review board who is self-described as a rubber stamp for the police department and who have never reviewed a complaint, commissioners unwilling to represent their community and take a stand against a jail expansion, a case dismissed against a cop for shooting a Black man on a seatbelt stop, a young Black men in jail for years without speedy trials, a $2.2 million funding increase in the 2020 budget for the police department, whose budget has also increased at a faster rate than the overall budget for the last 5 years at least. And very recently, allowing graphic, racist, and threatening content to be publicly displayed and arresting protesters rather than the drivers who ran vehicles into them. we have to acknowledge that Lawrence is not exempt from systemic racism. Second, we can listen to our community and recommend to the city work to be done to address sustainability and systemic racism. I want to be very sensitive to the listen part of that. So rather than recommend a slew of actions based on what I personally think is needed without input from the Black community, I will just stress two things. First, I'd like to highlight and support our Climate Protection and Adaptation Plan Subcommittee's work. This plan will be the strongest document to affect sustainability actions for both the City of Lawrence and Douglas County for several years to come. The values of the plan are underway, and I know the co-chairs are planning to include a heavy focus on community engagement, ensuring that marginalized and actively oppressed voices shape the plan. It's important to meet folks where they are, so to speak, in these times of social distancing, and to make sure that participating in some of these opportunities is both easy and quick. The second thing I want to stress is that our conversations around board priorities, we should always be willing to receive critical feedback and be open to suggestions on what we can do to help the city move toward equity and justice. So that is my statement. I'm happy to open it up for comments. Jasmine, I'm not sure if that is appropriate.
You can ask your fellow board members if they have any responses.
Okay. Fellow board members, I'm happy to open it up to any of you if you have responses or comments to that.
And I know that Kira, one of the co-chairs of the subcommittee, is having trouble connecting, so she is trying to join right now.
Oh, okay, great. Do you think we should wait for her? I'm not sure how long she's been trying.
Yeah, I think she'll just join when she can.
Okay, great. Okay, we will move on to our next item then, and that is approving minutes from March. So I will take a motion for that.
I move to approve the minutes from March.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the minutes from March from Allison and a second from Michael. I'll go through each of you now for your vote. Allison?
Approve. Yes.
Okay. I think it's aye or nay. So thank you. Okay, Rachel? You're muted.
Approve.
Okay. Kay?
Or I guess.
Thank you. Aye. Kay, aye or nay?
Aye.
Thank you. Michael, aye or nay?
Aye.
Thank you. Who else do we have? Lily, aye or nay?
Aye.
Okay, and this is Jackie Carroll. I say aye as well. So we have 6 ayes, and that passes unanimously. Okay, and we have public comment slated on our agenda next. We received one item. Since we're not doing any public comment during our meeting, we will move to the rest of our agenda items, the first of which is to receive our the staff report from Jasmine.
Thank you. So I included a written staff report, but am happy to talk in more detail about any of these. If you have questions, I'm going to go over each of them briefly. I wanted to provide some policy updates on some of the priorities that you'll be discussing upcoming on the agenda, just to give you a sense of where things are since the March meeting. So the first policy update is related to the 100% renewable energy ordinance, which came out of this group as a recommendation to the City Commission. That was approved in March by the City Commission, ordinance number 9744. In terms of progress on that goal already, there are 2 notable components. One is related to transportation, and it looks like Kira is coming in, so I was just going to let her in. Kira, is that you? You are muted currently. I can unmute you. Okay, Kira, is that you?
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Great. Yes, we can hear you. Since you're on the phone, I just wanted to give you instructions about how to mute and unmute yourself. You can use your mute button on your phone, or you can do *6 to mute and or unmute.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So I'm just going over some of the updates for the staff report. So the Lawrence Transit was awarded a federal grant for a low or zero emission buses, and so there will be 5 all-electric buses that will be joining the transit fleet and cycling out diesel-fueled buses. So these are the first electric vehicles that will be a part of that fleet. And so that's directly related to the ordinance and transitioning to 100% renewable energy of all sources, including electricity and fuel for vehicles as well. And then the second notable progress towards that ordinance number 9744 is that on June 9th, the city commissioners approved the city manager to enter an agreement with Evergy to source about 98% of all of energy for city facilities from wind for the next 20 years. So that will begin in 2021 when the wind farm is complete. There are links with more information about each of those items, and those are included in the staff report. Any questions about those two before I move on? Okay. The next policy update is related to the SAB priority, which was integrating sustainability into policy decisions. And so this is related to the capital improvements plan. The capital improvements plan is a tool to help the city look out for the next 5 years for major expenditures instead of looking from year to year. And a few months ago in May, the City Commission approved a new scoring formula for the capital improvements plan and how they evaluate each project that's proposed under that plan. And for the first time, a scoring category was created for sustainability, and a scoring category was also created for equity. And so this is the first time that either of those two elements have been integrated into the consideration for projects. So that is pretty exciting news, and I believe that we are the first in the Kansas City Region Plus that has done that. So that is something to definitely be proud of. Any questions on the capital improvement plan scoring? Okay. The next one related to that same priority area in terms of integrating sustainability into policy decisions is related to the Lawrence Strategic Plan. So I've talked to you about this for the last several meetings, and earlier this year, the City of Lawrence embarked on a strategic planning process to determine how city funds and resources should be directed. In February and in March, about 3,000 people participated in that strategic planning process. And there's a report and summary of the engagement results from that process. The city also acknowledges that a lot has changed in the world since March, since we last heard from the community. And so in acknowledgement of that, the city is going back out into the community and giving people a chance to tell us again how things may have changed and how those priorities may have shifted for you personally in these last few months. So there was an online forum this morning. There's another one tomorrow evening. And there's also a way to participate online if you are not able to make those online forums. So I would encourage all of you to participate and your networks to participate, because this plan really is intended to be a reflection of community values. And so we want to hear from as many people as possible throughout that process. One highlight that I wanted to elevate was that in the results from the engagement earlier this year, their sustainability and environmental programs was highlighted as something that people value. So I included one specific section in the staff report, and I'll just read that quickly. This is a section on page 2 of that engagement report. It says, participants hope that the city will implement more environmental programs in the future. Participants were also asked what's not true in the city of Lawrence that they hope will be true in 10 years. The most common response was that the city should do more to protect the environment through sustainability programs and by preparing for the effects of climate change. Many also discussed the desire for more services to address homelessness and for more affordable housing. So just wanted to highlight that because it's a topic that is not just a conversation not just happening at this board, but the community has elevated these issues as well. So before I move on, just wanted to pause and see if there were any questions about that. And just remember, you're muted until you unmute yourself. Okay. All right. The next policy update is around the single-use bag ordinance. That has been around. You guys have been working on that for a couple years now. There was direction from the City Commission to staff to draft that ordinance, and then there was some movement at the state, and we thought there might be some preemption happening at the state level, so we were waiting to see what was going on with that. The state did not take any action on that this year, so that is back on the agenda. Currently, that's scheduled to be considered by the City Commission in September of 2020. Any questions on that one?
Jasmine, I have a question. Is there an ordinance drafted that they're going to consider, or is this going to kind of come up as in the beginning of the process for them again?
So the city attorney's office has been doing some research and working on some language for the ordinance. I think it's important to acknowledge that the climate around this topic has shifted, especially with the COVID response and some behavior changing towards more single-use items, and so it's a more complicated issue than it was 6 months ago. So there may be a desire. We'll check with the city attorney's office in terms of getting some feedback from the commission before a complete ordinance is brought back to them, if they have any other additional guidance before that comes back for a vote. So we'll work with the city attorney's office on that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any idea, Jasmine, what directions they might go in at this point?
I have not had any interactions with our city commission about this topic recently. I will say that we're also monitoring what other cities and communities are doing related to this. So there are some that were kind of in similar spots as us in terms of the process where they hadn't quite adopted something yet, and sometimes those have been put on hold. In communities where a regulation was already adopted, some of those communities have put that on hold. So I'm trying to pull together some data on what other communities are doing right now on this topic. So some communities haven't made any adjustments, while others have. So I'm putting together that information, and that will be a part of the information presented to the city attorney's office as well as the commission when it comes forth again.
Okay, one quick point. I'm on 3 COVID-19 task forces, one of them with the CDC, looking at public health and healthcare provisions going forward. And the link to the exposure or infection due to of COVID-19 it's human to human. It's not the link to single-use plastics is minimal at all. So, I mean, if that question comes up, I'd be happy to provide some support and data on that.
Okay. Go ahead and send that to me if you already have that information, and we can include that.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Michael.
Would you share that with all of us, Jasmine?
Yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions on that item? Okay.
I mean, I would just, it's not so much a question, but I think that kind of establishing, and the scientific basis for, kind of Michael's, his observation and CDC-based observation that a link between COVID and sort of reusable plastic or reusable canvas bags or the like is not there is going to be something that's, I think, really important to establish. And I'm not sure if that's something that we would need to that wouldn't be in the ordinance itself probably, but like in terms of the conversation. Because I think some of the rhetoric out there would tends to suggest that, well, you can't bring canvas or reusable bags into stores anymore because it might carry the virus, and I'm concerned that rhetoric is, or that perspective, I guess I should say, is out there. So I think that's going to be really important.
Okay. All right. Number 5 on the staff update is related to the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. So we have not, I have not seen you since March, since the March meeting. And at that point, we were moving full steam ahead on launching the engagement process for the climate plan for April. Because of the pandemic, we, as staff, decided to kind of press pause on that while we figured out our internal capacity as well as how we could make some adjustments for engagement, because our engagement plan was heavily based on person-to-person, going to community, and so that has all changed. So we are in the process of working with the subcommittee on that plan development. I had a meeting with Kira and Makokwa last week as the co-chairs for that group to talk about establishing some values for the planning process, and that will guide the engagement strategies as well in our new world. So that is coming, but just wanted to acknowledge that our schedule is modified from what we last talked about, and to that we also acknowledge that the priority populations that we were planning to engage in the climate planning effort are those same populations that are being hit hardest by COVID and the effects of COVID as well, and so. And we are seeing that racial justice and is another layer of crisis that's happening. So really we have kind of a triple crisis happening right now, and acknowledging that it's the same group of people that's being hit hardest by all three of those. So figuring out how to engage with the community during this time, we want to put a lot of thought into it, and do it in a thoughtful way. So staff will be working with the subcommittee to identify those values in the upcoming weeks in the next month, hopefully. And we will use that information to make a new plan for engagement for this process. We also have the opportunity to participate in the Kansas City Metro Regional Planning effort, and I just had a meeting with them today, and they have a lot of good data that we can use to inform the conversations around vulnerabilities and hazards and adaptation that are relevant to Douglas County. So wanted to give you just an update on that process. I know that has been slower than we all wanted it to be, and we haven't gotten as much information out there as we could have. So more information will be coming, but just know that we're working on engagement sensitive to our current climate, and that we are partnering on the regional Kansas City efforts, and they have already started to put together some data on both a greenhouse gas inventory for the region, as well as looking at climate vulnerabilities for the region. So some of that information is linked in the staff report, and we are happy to share that in other formats as well. At the bottom of that item, there's also a link to a chart that lays out, what Lawrence has done to date, what our current process looks like, and how it and its relation to the Kansas City effort. So just trying to give a visual of how these are connected and distinct from each other. I know there are probably questions on that, so pause again. Okay.
Hi, Jasmine, has the climate group met? Because I didn't believe that I'd gotten any notice of that. The subcommittee.
So I know that Kira's on here now, so I will defer to you on answering, Kira. We can't hear you. You may be muted. Okay, well, Kira, jump in if you can. So I met with the co-chairs last week, and I don't think that there have been meetings of that group. I know that there were attempts earlier this year, but the chairs of that group had a hard time coordinating because of the effects of COVID and how that was impacting the community. So, Kira, I think you're on now. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. There.
Are you just asking, have we had any meetings? Because no.
Okay.
We haven't had any meeting.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for clarifying, Kira.
Thank you.
Macaqua has had some undelayable personal issues, and I've just been working around the clock at the stupid grocery store because everything has been manic there. But she is right now in Oklahoma with a dying father, and when she's back here, then we're going to start scheduling meetings because we do have a lot that we have to start covering. And so no, nobody's been left out of the loop. Stuff has just been insane. And then now we're gearing up again, and then we'll get meeting times out to everybody.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Is there going to be a time to talk about the public comment?
So the public comment that was forwarded to you, and I'll get posted in the minutes as well, that my interpretation was that was related to your conversation that is coming up next regarding priorities.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. Okay, and the last item that I had on the staff report was that just to share that the Sustainability Office was chosen to be one of 6 host sites for an Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Fellow sponsored by the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. So we're really excited to have a fellow this summer, and they will be working on the climate planning process. And so they'll be looking at data, compiling resources, and looking to helping us with some of structuring the engagement process. So I anticipate that they will be joining the next meeting of the Sustainability Advisory Board, and I can introduce them on that call. So that is all I have for the staff report.
This is Jackie. Okay, thank you, Jasmine. We will move on to our second agenda item, which is a discussion for the board on identifying our priorities for the remainder of this year. We have 5 meetings left for this year. We had quite a long list of priorities previously. Luckily, we've gotten quite a good bit of progress done on it. And in talking with Jasmine, considering that we haven't met for a few meetings and considering, the way the world looks right now, we may find it best to reduce that list a little bit and focus on just a few things. And I know that developing the climate protection and adaptation plan is going to necessarily be one of those priorities. We need to keep that subcommittee going, of course. But I'll read through the rest of the priorities that we had identified previously, just to refresh everybody's memory. Adopt 100% renewable energy goal for city facilities and citywide. I would say that's mostly been done. The plan for doing it would be underway next. Decreasing food waste, decrease single-use plastics, energy efficiency incentives for rental property, and develop a sustainability decision criteria for policies that come before the City Commission. So that's 6 items. I would say 5 are still in process. So at this point, I want to at least first maybe talk about if everybody's comfortable narrowing that down to just a few items in order to use our resources wisely for the rest of the year. Any thoughts on how long everyone thinks that list should be, what you're comfortable with? I mean, I always think the magic number is 3, but of course it doesn't need to land there.
I think the efficiency thing should be part of the climate plans, and that's like retrofitting and weatherproofing. That's one of not the main issues, but it's like a pretty big issue. It's a pretty big part of the climate plan. So I think it fits okay inside the action plan.
I agree with Kara. And I think that it should be bigger than just rental properties. So that goes hand in hand with the climate action plan.
Thank you. That would put us down to 4 if we wanted to just wrap that up under the same subcommittee to address.
So in terms of one to reduce or potentially postpone, I don't know that now is the time to take on single-use plastics kind of in a meaningful way. I think maybe we would get more traction with that if we put it off for a year. I mean, there's a large part of me that doesn't want to put it off, but just kind of given COVID, I could see a rationale for postponing that priority and maybe picking it up again in a year or so.
I think just because of what I see at the grocery store, as much as I hate it, because I think this will be a great time to push it through, people are so freaked out anyway. I agree with you.
Okay, I'm going to review a list based on some comments so far, because if everybody is comfortable with what's been discussed so far, that would already put us down to 3 items. And those 3 items would be the Climate Protection and Adaptation Plan, which would then, of course, include the efficiency incentives for not just rental properties potentially. And then second would be decreasing food waste. And third would be developing the sustainability decision criteria for items that go before the city and planning commissions.
So can I ask, and I don't know, maybe this question would be most targeted to Jasmine, but how much overlap does the city's kind of the procedures adopted for capital improvement plans in implementing sustainability and equity considerations, how much would that overlap with that priority number 3? Is there room for us to meaningfully do more there? Or is that one that has, for all practical purposes, been kind of addressed outside of this committee?
So this is Jasmine. I think that there is still opportunities that capital improvements plan and integration of the sustainability scoring for that is an example of how sustainability could be incorporated into decision making. I will say, circling back to the strategic plan is going to dictate the criteria for policies coming before the city commission once it's adopted. So that's the other lever that will be strongest. Incorporating sustainability into the strategic planning process and ultimately as sustainability shows up in that final document, then that will the commitment of the city is that everything aligns with that strategic plan. So that's the other opportunity. If for some reason the strategic plan does not include sustainability, then it will be difficult to add sustainability on as a decision-making criteria because everything really is going to be focused on the strategic plan. So I know that there's some structure that's coming and some framework that's come along with that strategic planning process that will also kind of provide a framework for how resources are allocated in the city, and we don't know all the details for that. From what I know so far, sustainability is going to be a component of that. So all that to say, I feel like the strategic plan is an opportunity for sustainability. And in terms of how that manifests into decision making, I think that will be probably part of a larger conversation of how the strategic plan itself informs policy decisions and discussion at the City Commission. So I don't know what that will look like yet, and what your involvement as a sustainability advisory board could look like for that. But I think it's definitely something to keep on the radar in terms of, if you as a board feel strongly about what that should look like. So I don't know if that provided any clarity for you, Rachel.
I was wondering, Jasmine, is this the appropriate time for you to discuss the public comment?
Yeah, so I will just pull that up. You should have received an email with the public comment, but I'll just read through it in front of you, and then I'll include the email in the minutes for this meeting. This is a message from Joe Harrington from the City of Lawrence, or who lives in the City of Lawrence. Dear Sustainability Advisory Board members, I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing because I noticed that priorities for the remainder of 2020 is on the agenda for your meeting on Wednesday, and I have a suggestion. I know that the climate crisis is and ought to be high on your list of issues to address. Lawrence has made major strides towards climate change mitigation, especially by declaring a climate emergency and by purchasing 100% renewable energy. However, the other part of responding to the climate crisis is adaptation. We know that even if the world went carbon neutral tomorrow, world temperatures would continue going up, and higher temperatures would bring more of the kind of chaotic weather we've seen increasingly over decades. Has Lawrence done a community climate resiliency assessment? If not, it seems to me that this is long overdue, and there are plenty of guides and models out there for conducting one. The fourth annual climate assessment for the Southern Great Plains recommended regional adaptation efforts that harden or relocate critical infrastructure to withstand extreme weather, as well as preparations for increased food insecurity, water shortages, disease vectors, and dangerously hot weather. Also, climate refugees from coastal areas could potentially add to Lawrence's affordable housing problems. This will be a challenging undertaking, to be sure, but it needs to be done. Lack of preparation for the pandemic didn't keep it away and hasn't made it any easier to control. The same will be true of the effects of climate change. Developing a resiliency assessment and adaptation plan does not mean giving up on mitigation. Instead, by making the effects of climate change more visible on a local level, it may spur more people to action. A comprehensive climate adaptation plan necessarily would involve other and city county boards and would need a coordinated and sustained effort. But it has to start somewhere, and it seems to me that the Sustainability Advisory Board would be the logical place for the process to begin. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Joe Harrington, Lawrence.
Thank you, Jasmine. I think that we need to understand what is included in the scope of work that has already been started, because I agree that I think that this type of objective comprehensive assessment for the local area needs to be done so that we know which items to select for the adaptation part. And but I don't know, because I haven't met enough with the subcommittee to know what you've already got started in the works.
And I can just add some context for that. A lot of what was mentioned in the public comment related to the types of data is going to be a part of the Kansas City regional effort. So a regional adaptation strategy is a part of that scope of work. And so we'll be able to access that information as well as the national data that is available by larger region than that. So that is going to be one of the components of the work of the our sustainability fellow this summer. And so really over the next few weeks, they're going to be compiling the data and data sources so that we can use that to inform the climate planning process.
Is there a format that fellow's using? Because I have found a toolkit that does actually tie into that particular reference that the public commenter suggests regarding the Great Plains, the Great Southern Plains. And so I was just wondering if there was a particular format that fellow's following.
That hasn't been established yet. They just started last Wednesday. So go ahead and send that over and take a look at it.
Okay, that would be great. Because to me, we have regional similarities in the from the Kansas City area, as well as specific differences with the Lawrence and Douglas County area. So it seems like we should be able to look at this systematically. And I did want to mention that Douglas County has a hazard mitigation plan, and Robert Bernanke, the director of the Douglas County Emergency Management Division, is the responsible person for that hazard mitigation plan. And it is also a time that it's up for revision. That mitigation plan was developed following FEMA recommendations, the state of Kansas and FEMA requirement. So, but that is already established. A lot of those mitigation areas are identified too in that hazard mitigation plan. So I'll also send that over. Whatever we do, we need to make sure that we're including that group so that it's tied in cohesively into the city county planning process.
Thank you, Kay.
Mm-hmm.
So has the city officially declared a climate crisis?
The city of Lawrence has not officially declared a climate crisis. It was acknowledged in, I believe, the Earth Day proclamation a few months ago, but it hasn't been a separate item.
How did they phrase it in the proclamation?
I can look it up and send you the link for that.
Okay, cool.
This is Jackie. Any thoughts from anyone else on the 3 items being our priority for the rest of the year? The adaptation and protection plan, the decreased food waste, and sustainability decision criteria, whether yes or no?
So I think those sound good. You know, unless adaptation and greenhouse gas mitigation, those are pretty, different kind of overall courses of action, and they're both pretty darn big. I guess I'm a little concerned about the combining those two under a single heading, unless this is kind of the way it's already being done, with the KC Metro program and with the Jasmine, the sort of the climate. I'm not even sure what term to use, but the climate activities that are going on for the climate adaptation plan outside of SAB. I mean, I guess if those two things are lumped together in both of those other venues, then perhaps it makes sense to keep the combination here. But just kind of in general, I think the practical activities associated with mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and with adapting to kind of the increase in weather-related hazards that are likely to come from climate change are two practically pretty different sort of sets of activities. But
and I'll
that's my observation of those 3 things.
This is Jasmine. I'll just respond to that. So for the Kansas City effort, it is a combined process, and that is the also mirrored in the Lawrence Douglas County work. So one of the things that the co-chairs talked about last week was really focusing their efforts for this almost like first phase is on engagement and developing a solid engagement strategy, acknowledging that as that starts to wind down, there's going to be, like you said, Rachel, different topics around energy, transportation. So within each of, within the climate action and within the adaptation, there's a number of different categories that will need attention as well. And so while this could remain one priority, acknowledging that there are many things that come out of, that will need attention, that come out of this process, I think is important to highlight. I would say if you're looking at just until the end of the year, we're going to make progress on the engagement for sure, and we're going to make progress on starting to pull together some of those some of the action steps related to that. But it won't be done by the end of the year. And so if you're looking at just like what this board wants to be engaged in until December, just keeping that in mind that, even though this is on your priority list, it's not going to stop in December, that there's going to be the continuation of getting into all of those different topic areas beyond December.
This is Michael. A lot of jurisdictions have been rolling in adaptation goals into their hazard mitigation plan. So they do end up being on separate tracks. They've got a separate climate change plan, but also the adaptation goes into the hazard mitigation plan. I think ultimately in the future, that's probably where it makes the most sense, because you're already doing flood mitigation to that plan. If floodplains shift due to climate change, that's going to get handled in that plan anyway. So it's something to consider.
This is Jackie again. I would say that we haven't heard much about decreasing food waste. Is that anything that someone here wants to focus on for the rest of the year?
Do we already have a committee for that, I feel like? Or am I making that up?
This is Jackie. I don't have the list of who chose which priorities at the moment, but I believe each one had a list of people who were interested at the time. I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't have the list in front of me, so I don't know if anyone is on the meeting.
This is Jasmine. For context on this one, and a reminder, this was one that was shared with a shared priority with the Food Policy Council, and so there has been a group historically working on this. And Michael, it looks like you just unmuted, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, we've had ongoing discussions and initiatives within the food waste subcommittee on Food Policy Council for 3 years now. So, and that's not going to change. I mean, it's still a priority in the Food Policy Council. So, I mean, just know that's going to keep going on that way. But, how much involvement, if there's interest among SAB members, I'd love to have help. But, if there's other things you want to focus on, I understand that too. Regardless, as things shake out a little bit, hopefully after we get back to normal a little bit, we may ask for joint approval or joint support for certain initiatives or recommendations. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, this is Allison, and I would be willing to help with that committee. So just let me know.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very helpful. Thank you, Michael and Allison. So it sounds like we have interest in the 3 points that we have. I would like to leave it open right now for anyone to speak up if they do not like those 3 items and would like to suggest something else for us to focus on for the rest of the year.
Jackie, this is Jasmine. Will you just read through those 3 just for clarification?
Of course, this is Jackie again. So number 1 would be the Climate Protection and Adaptation Plan, which wraps in the efficiency incentives for properties, not just rental properties, which had been said before. Decrease food waste, which is co-goal with Food Policy Council. Number 3 is the sustainability decision criteria that would be used by the planning and city commissions for their agenda items. Okay, I don't hear any objections, so I think we have our list. A nice round 3 items. So if there are any further comments, I'll take them now on this topic. Otherwise, we will move on. Okay, thank you. So we will move on to our next agenda item, which is just to discuss future agenda items. Obviously, we've had several months we needed to come to a decision on what we were going to focus on for the rest of our meetings. And now that we have that, we should wrap back around to talk about what we're going to talk about next time. So I know that back in March, we still had a few future agenda items. I'm not sure if they are all still appropriate or relevant anymore. A couple that come to mind were an update on solar in Kansas, solar power, as well as the legislation on the carbon dividend. And that is all that I remember at the moment. So I'm not sure if those are still priorities for everyone. Based on the goals that we just agreed to, they don't really fall in there very neatly. But I am open to hearing what your thoughts are on whether you're interested in those 2 items and if you have additional items to add.
Jackie, this is Jasmine. Just wanted to highlight one other topic that was included in the March future agenda items was the topic around involuntary trash. That was brought up at that meeting.
Okay. I'd like to hear if anyone has interest in keeping any of these items as a future agenda item.
This is Kay. I'm not sure that right now the carbon dividend legislation is important for us. I think that's more of a federal legislation piece. And until we develop more fully our climate action and adaptation plan, I don't think that should be discussed right now.
Okay, this is Jackie again. Any objections?
I'll just add in. So I think my understanding is that what we were being asked to do there was to essentially make a recommendation that the city commission sort of like listen to or have an avenue to be presented, a similar presentation that we got. I don't think that my sense is that it's not like a request for a lot of work on our part, that it wouldn't be an ongoing thing. And so I think that one way or another, just, because these people came to our meeting and presented to us and asked us this question, that we should kind of close the loop with them, one way or another.
It would seem to me then that we should get back with them and say that at this time it's not a priority, because I think our city commission is dealing with a lot of different things that is also going to put them in a situation to not be a priority for them as well. I can't speak for them, but we've got other issues that will need to come before the city commission, and I don't think that one is an important one for us to spend any time on right now. No offense to the people that made the presentation.
Any other opinions on that? Okay, perhaps we'll leave it as a future agenda item, and we can discuss at our next meeting whether we want to wrap back around and make a final decision on whether we support it or not, or disregard it for now as not a priority. Solar in Kansas. Does anybody want to continue to have that as a future agenda item? Really, it would just be an update on legislation and that sort of thing, I believe.
It's not really a bad idea, because I do like the idea of doing it. There has been a Kansas Supreme Court decision on residential solar, so it might be a good time to go ahead and talk a little bit about it ahead of the next legislative session.
Okay.
It wouldn't necessarily need to be next month.
And I would also suggest that it be, because it sounds like this would be purely informational. And maybe that could be pretty quick. Sometimes some of the informational presentations we get end up being quite long. And so, I feel like, this update, while I would be quite interested in hearing it, would probably be a very, just a quick agenda item, as opposed to, an hour-long presentation.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like we have interest in that. We'll keep that on there. And lastly, involuntary trash, which I believe are things like the newspapers and ads that you get in your front yard and that you can't get rid of. You can't stop them. Do we still have interest in having that as a future agenda item?
I would like that as an agenda item, please.
I'd like that as well. I'd love to know how to get rid of that.
Yeah. Okay. We will keep all three of those items as future agenda items then. Are there any additional items that any of you would like to add?
This is Jasmine. I just wanted to note that we as staff may have some additional agenda items, just keeping you all in the loop about some of the new changes that may be happening. So as I find more information about that, and I'll work with the chair and co-chair to get those updates scheduled.
This is Jackie. Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, I will move along to our next item then, which is just member updates. So do we have any updates from our board members? Personal, professional, sustainability related? It doesn't sound like it. So that leaves us to the end of our meeting. I will go ahead and adjourn for today. Thank you very much, everybody. I look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.